All right, welcome everybody. This is Greg with me today. We're going to be talking about vim.diagnostic. This is the first time that you are seeing this, but this is actually the second time that we're recording this. The first time we recorded this, I forgot to press a button. So I've streamed before. I have made a few YouTube videos, but in classic fashion, I forgot to do something very important. So we're going to do this. It'll be the first time that you're hearing it, but the second time we're going through. So Greg, why don't you introduce yourself again / for the first time?
All right, sounds good. Thanks, TJ. Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Gregory Anders. I go by Greg. Typically, you may know me by my GitHub or Matrix handle, gpanders. I've interacted with a few people on the interwebs, so it's nice for you, I guess, to put a face to the name.
Yeah.
I've been with I'm the newest addition as of today to the neovim core maintainer team,
Woot woot.
and I've been working on neovim in general since about June of this year of 2021. I've been a Vim user for much longer than that, for about 5 or 6 years. So I've been around the block for a little while, but I'm super excited to be here and talk about vim.diagnostic for the 0.6 release.
Awesome. How did you make the transition from Vim to neovim?
Yeah, so like I mentioned, I've been using Vim in some capacity for about 5 or 6 years full time as my primary text editor and development environment. For most of that time, I was aware of neovim as the project and kind of checked it on it every once in a while, but I didn't consider myself a neovim user per se. I occasionally toyed with aliasing Vim to nvim, and I had one of those hybrid vimrc init.vim setups with a lot of if has nvim kind of stuff. But more or less, it was kind of transparent to me. I just kind of used whatever was available. And it wasn't until earlier this year, just before the 0.5 release, when I really started to kind of check in with neovim development, and I was, there's a lot of buzz, obviously, around it, a lot of really exciting features, and a lot of people like you, TJ, doing a lot of hype for it. And I got drawn in, I guess, and I finally committed to going full-time in Vim. I deleted my entire .vim directory and moved it all to .config nvim, init.vim, the whole deal. And that's around the time I started using nvim full-time neovim over Vim. And it was also around that time, it was around the same time that I started contributing to neovim too. It was when I made that transition in all my dot files, removing all the compatibility stuff, all the if checks, and the different things you have to do to make it work for both Vim and nvim. And of course, naturally, the first thing you check when you do that is how much faster is my startup time.
Gotta check the startup time.
Gotta check the startup time. Why? That's the most important thing. So I was looking at that, expecting to see it be so much faster, with because it was so much more slimmed down. And I noticed in the startup time log that the color scheme file was being sourced twice. And I was like, oh no, that I can't stand for that. It was like an extra 6 or 7 milliseconds. And I was like, this is precious milliseconds of my life being wasted sourcing a color scheme file twice. So I actually found an open issue on the neovim GitHub and commented on it, and shortly after opened a PR to fix it. And that was my not technically my very first PR to neovim, because I had another very small one a long time ago. But that was my first one. That was, I think, a significant contribution, and the what kind of got my journey as a contributor started. And that was in, I want to say June or July of this year. So that's kind of my origin story, I guess, of how I got started using neovim full time and getting involved with the maintenance team.
Very cool. And I'm sure everyone in the chat is they're already giving you claps. This is a recording, of course, but they're already giving you claps for that 7 millisecond save. I mean, for you, since you saved it for everybody, that's actually a good investment. You really,
that's a great
it's a multiply,
point.
right? Like, it's a multiplier. You didn't just save you that time. You also saved every nvim user that time. So that's pretty big, I would say.
I hope so. Yeah, I hope it was helpful. Hope somebody noticed.
Yeah.
Maybe, I don't know.
Someone did.
I don't know if everyone else is as uptight as I am about that kind of stuff, but maybe somebody noticed.
I can pretty much guarantee you there's somebody who's got an automatic benchmark script for pulling down the next nightly release and checking the diff of the startup times. So I
Oh
think
yeah,
you're
you're
safe.
probably right. You're probably right.
Very cool. Well, yeah, it's exciting to have you on the team, and we've been having a lot of fun. So I think today, as maybe chat has gotten a hint from the background here of vim.diagnostic, let's maybe talk a little bit about what this feature is, sort of how did it come about, and why should we have this? What is even the purpose of having this kind of thing getting shipped in the release?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we'll start a little bit of history. When
Mm-hmm.
the zero point 0.5 release came out, obviously the big flagship feature was the built-in LSP client integration. This has been one of the biggest and most popular features in neovim, and certainly one thing that sets it apart from its ancestor. And one thing that the language server protocol provides that the nvim LSP client also includes is this concept of diagnostics. So a language server can analyze and parse the source code of the file you're working in and provide static analysis for style errors, warnings, anything like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it can integrate that into your editor in a really nice, visually appealing and useful way. But of course, long before we had the language servers, we had just standard linting tools, and these have been around for decades as external processes that you run from the command line on your source code to get this kind of information. And this also has a long history in the Vim ecosystem with plugins like Syntastic and Ale and NeoMake. So this is nothing really new. But
Mm-hmm.
now that we have LSP diagnostics and we have these, I want to use the word legacy, but not in a derogatory term. Just
Mm-hmm.
the old way to do it,
Mm-hmm.
but they were distinct and they didn't really integrate very well with each other. And so naturally, people still wanted to use these tools, but maybe they didn't want to have both LSP and something like Ale installed at the same time. So we started seeing a proliferation of these plugins that use these third-party linting tools, but hooked it into the LSP infrastructure.
Mm-hmm.
And there was kind of general consensus, general feeling among the neovim development team that this was kind of hacky, maybe not the way we really want this to work. Using LSP diagnostics for something that's not LSP is just not a very elegant or clean solution. And I just happened to be, I guess, in the right place at the right time, or the wrong place at the wrong time.
The right place for us, and
yeah,
no comment for you, I guess.
And I've been contributing to neovim. I had a couple of PRs under my belt, and I was just kind of looking for something to do and some way to help out. And I was working on some linting scripts of my own, and just kind of felt annoyed at having to go through the LSP subsystem. So I just pinged Michael, our resident LSP guru, and asked him, hey, Michael, I thought I remembered you saying something about you wanted to pull out diagnostics from LSP into a more general subsystem. He said, yeah, we want to do that. Someone just has to do the work. And so I kind of just said, all right, challenge accepted. And I started working on it. And I didn't realize at the time, I think, how much work it actually would be. I figured, how hard can it be? It's just, move a file, change a couple words, a couple variable names, and we're off and running. That was definitely an underestimation of the effort involved. But the end result is what we have now in this release is diagnostic. So that's the history leading up to it for anyone who is interested. As far as why is it useful, or what does it do, or why should we care, let's talk about that. So vim.diagnostic is mostly aimed for plugin authors. It's not like LSP or Tree Sitter. It doesn't provide anything super sexy or flashy for end users directly. End users, of course, will be the beneficiaries of the increased flexibility and composability that plugins are able to provide. But this is primarily something for plugin authors to use. So if you look at the status quo, the current state of affairs for diagnostics, and actually let's put a pin in that real quick and talk about why this is even useful to begin with. Like diagnostics, right? Like we're just assuming this is useful, but let's talk about why we even want that. Being able to evaluate and analyze your code in your editor as a first-class feature is something that's really valuable. And this is something that kind of people just take for granted now. and is part of IDEs is the ability to see an error in your source code before you ever run or compile it. And obviously, editors like Visual Studio Code and some of the other really popular ones just provide this out of the box. And Vim and neovim haven't been left in the dust, as we've said already many times. There have been many plugins that provide this, so it's a useful feature. It's a useful feature that we want to provide as part of the neovim skeleton, the baseline editor experience that we can give to users. So this API.
The other thing too, I'll just mention quickly, is I think it bodes well for sort of like an interface, right? Like we can create an interface easily, and we don't have to implement everything in core. So it's in a lot of ways like a really high leverage thing to ship in core, because we don't have to imagine every way you could generate a diagnostic, right? We're just going to say, well, if you give us a list of diagnostics, we can do the normal diagnostic things with it. And I think that's part of the reason why it makes sense to be in core, rather than just saying like everyone should use this particular plugin or this particular sort of set of scripts or something. Well, this way we can provide that sort of effectively just an interface to say, give us this and we'll compose them together well.
Yes, that's exactly right. And we still want to empower and enable plugin authors instead of taking their creativity and their creations away from them. Right. We don't want to implement the linter, right, or the single diagnostic implementation. We just want to provide useful APIs that other people can build on top of, and that has always been the primary design goal of vim.diagnostic. And you mentioned interface, and I think that's one of the really cool things that we'll hopefully see with plugin authors that users will be able to experience is, the way things are today, AO kind of has their own interface and Neomake has their own interface. And if you want to use another plugin that consumes diagnostics from those, they have to know AO. They have to know how Neomake works. And so it's, in a sense, it's kind of analogous to the language server thing, right? It's rather than having m times n, you just have m plus n. And by creating a nice abstraction boundary. So now with the way this is going to work and moving forward is diagnostic plugins, so-called producers, will generate diagnostics in any way they want to. We don't impose any kind of, we just say, give us a list of, these little data structures and we'll handle the rest. And those go into the system. And then consumers, if you want to show fancy text or put it in your status line or make little floaty windows, whatever you want to do, all the data is there. It's in a standardized, convenient format, and you can do whatever you want with it. And that'll, plug and play. It's composable with any other, between a whole variety of diagnostic plugins. So that's the kind of flexibility and extensibility that we're trying to provide with this.
Cool. Yeah, and I think as well, one of the interesting and sort of fun things about keeping it in core is sort of this reuse of other Vim features that we've all come to know and love. Maybe you can talk a little bit about integration with quick fix list or sort of the similar ideas of error format, things like that.
Yeah, we certainly absolutely want to respect the heritage of Vim. We don't want to come along and bulldoze everything that's already been done and just say, oh, we don't need that, we'll do it our own way. We recognize and appreciate that neovim is still Vim. It's right there in the name. We want to improve upon that experience, and that's obviously a subjective thing, but we want to respect that heritage and leverage it as much as we possibly can. So we certainly have tried to do that here. We have many functions that integrate with the quick fix list backwards and forwards in both directions with the error format functionality, but we've also tried to improve upon it. Anyone who's ever tried to use error format in Vim knows how much of a pain it is. Yes. I've been using Vim in some capacity, like I said, for 6+ years, and I still, anytime I have to write an error format, I still spend hours reading through the help docs and I'm I still understand how this works. So the Lua, being built on Lua is a huge it gives us an enormous amount of leverage, and we can extend upon Lua pattern matching paradigms, and that's what we do. And so we provide APIs that mimic some things like the string.match that you're familiar with in Lua. We have a diagnostic match, diagnostic.match, that just takes in a string and some capture groups with a standard Lua pattern, and you get a diagnostic out of it. And this is much easier to use than error format. And so this is just another way that we want to, we hope to empower, enable people to do new and cool things. But yeah, like you said, I feel like I can't repeat this enough. We totally want to honor that heritage, honor the tradition of where VIMs come from. We don't want to reinvent any wheels. We want to just make the wheel better, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think another example of that's pretty cool is like some of the features that we have in vim.diagnostic, like diagnostic.match, came from some of the community authors who were exploring how we could sort of do diagnostics in a really elegant and nice way.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm glad you said that, because it's worth giving credit where credit is due. It's true that I did write most of the refactor code, but I had an enormous amount of help, both in code review and bug reporting, issue reporting, and even some of the API came from ideas from other people in the neovim community and on the maintainer team. I especially want to recognize Matthias, who's the author of nvim lint, which is my linting plugin of choice that now, by the way, also uses vim.diagnostic under the hood. And a lot of the APIs that we ended up integrating into core came straight from his plugin, because he did such an amazing job at providing an intuitive and usable interface. So we definitely congregated ideas from a wide array of implementations and making this as useful as possible.
Yeah, I think it's pretty exciting for people who don't know. I think as well, you'll be able to do lots of really interesting things with the diagnostics as users as well. So there's things like you'll be able to move to the next diagnostic or the previous within your buffer or things like that, which is really cool, because now it's not just from LSP, right? And you don't have to have separate buttons or hotkeys or whatever to be able to do these. It's this one unified API, which is really exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, just to reiterate something we said earlier, it doesn't matter if those plugins come from plugin X or plugin Y. They all end up in the same place, and they all end up as the consumer, as someone who wants to use those diagnostics, it's all the same, which I think will go a long way in unleashing a lot of really cool, creative ideas. And another cool thing I'm excited about, to see what people do with this, is we have the whole concept of how we display diagnostics to the users. So, by default, we ship virtual text and signs and I think underlining. But those are not special really in any meaningful way. They're just kind of the default, what we call handlers. In the same way LSP has handlers, you can add diagnostic handlers. And I have to, again, credit where credit is due. Michael kind of pushed for this from the beginning, and I was resistant to it at first, but I eventually came to see the light. And I have to say, he was absolutely right, because it's just unleashes a lot of really, a lot of flexibility and a lot of power. And so any plugin, any user can add a new handler into the subsystem and do anything you want with it. So, I think this will be really cool for GUIs, third-party external GUIs, other kind of remote UIs. So it's a cool thing to see. I'm really excited to see what people end up doing with it.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think GUIs will be particularly cool. Maybe you want to show it with some different font, or it's a GUI, you can do whatever you want. So it's pretty exciting to see what people are going to do now that there's a standardized interface. It doesn't feel so bad as like a GUI author to be like, well, do I really want to add like custom support for this like plugin or something like that, right? Like, oh no, this is the core feature. I can build around this, and I can build like my own UI display handler for diagnostics, which is really exciting. Yeah. Cool. Well, any last comments or things you'd like everybody to know about vim.diagnostic?
I just want to say I'll consider it a job well done. I'll think that I've done my job well if people kind of forget that it exists. And I obviously want it to be useful, and we want people to use it and do cool things with it. But it's not a user facing, very shiny kind of thing like LSP is. It's something that's meant to be useful and get out of the way. And we want people to, that's what we want. We want people to spend, more time being productive obviously, and I'm guilty of this too, tweakers are going to tweak, right? Like we're all addicted to
Mhm.
modifying our startup scripts to
Yep.
try new things and experiment, which is part of what makes using neovim so fun in the first place. So
Yeah,
I'm
definitely.
certainly not discouraging that by any means, but we don't want we don't want to force people to do that. And so
Mhm.
is if vim.diagnostic just lets people do useful things and gets out of their way, nothing would make me happier. That
Yeah.
also means I don't get as many bug reports that I have to fix, which also makes me happy. So
Yeah, right. If
uh,
you know it's good when it blends in and you don't get any new bug reports this week.
yeah, it either means that no one's using it or it's perfect, and I'm like, well, it's
Right.
probably not perfect. So um, but yeah, I'm excited for it. And yeah,
Yeah, great. Cool. Yeah, I'm excited too. I mean, I've been using it on Nightly. I know a lot of people in chat as well have been using Nightly and already experiencing it. I mean, LSP, vim.lsp is now basically one of the producers of vim.diagnostic. So it's
right.
exciting to see that. So if you're getting LSP diagnostics showing in neovim, you're already using this feature. And in one of the ways, I think, sort of this same idea that you're hoping happens, right? It's just like magically the LSP things show up and they're pretty and they're just the way you want in the editor. And you didn't have to think about it. It was just there working for you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, thanks, Greg. And I'm glad that you took the time to record this with me twice. We didn't say exactly the same stuff. We didn't really script it, but I hope everybody had fun and learned some new stuff. If you have questions about it, make sure to ask Michael. Okay. Bye, everybody.
Yeah. Thanks, TJ. Talk to you later.